Right. It's about 4 minutes after 10. I'd like to call the September 22nd, 2021 meeting of the board of the Texas State Board of Plumbing Examiners to order. Dawn, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. James Ainsworth,
Present.
Dave Yelovich,
Present.
Ben Friedman,
Present.
Milton Gutierrez,
Present.
Justin McDonald,
I'm present.
Robbie Jalnos, William Clark, we have a quorum.
Our meeting today is being held in person with 6 of our board members, which constitutes a quorum. 3 of our board members are absent. Our meeting will be held in person. We have several guests with us today, as well as we've got some people sign on listening remotely. One of the things I'd like to do first is entertain a motion to excuse Robbie Janos. Robbie has talked with me, and he is in transit right now to California and was unable to be with us. And if there is a motion, the other 2 board members I have not heard from. Has anyone else heard from? Okay, so let's motion would be in order to excuse Robbie Janos from the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. The first item on our agenda, well, before I say that, we've got several guests here, but we've got 2 distinguished guests that I want to recognize first. Aaron Bennett and Julie Davis, both from the Regulatory Compliance Division of the Governor's Office. They're here later in the day, are going to give us a presentation about the function they serve. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate your attendance, as well as everyone else in the room, and look forward to hearing your presentation. Most of you might recognize the name of Julie Davis. Julie's claim to fame was, before going to the governor's office, she was in the Sunset, worked for the Sunset Commission, and did the Sunset review of the Texas Plumbing Board, and took some heat over it from the industry. But I'm going to tell you, coming in and as chairman of the agency, what she identified as efficiencies and opportunities for improvement, I have used this past year as a template to address some of those efficiencies. So I think the vast majority of the recommendations that you made were with merit. They took a lot of thought, and I, for one, appreciate the work that you did. And from the industry standpoint, if the industry is going to benefit from the work that you did, because again, a lot of the work that this board has done this year has used your recommendations as a template to make it a better agency. And that benefits the consumers and it benefits the industry. So as difficult a job it was and as awkward position that you're in, I read everything. I thought it was really good advice. The only thing I didn't read, and I didn't know until I got here, is the agency is a good agency. And I'll tell you, they have done a lot and had done a lot to address some of the issues that you raised by the time I got here. I didn't read that in the report, but every recommendation you made, with the exception of abolishing the agency, I supported. So thank you for your work. Sometimes it's kind of lonesome being out there, but I'll tell you, our industry benefited from your good work, and we want to thank you publicly. And we're thrilled to have you with with the governor's office and in this new assignment you have. So as we're going forward, item number 5 on our agenda has to do with developing a curriculum that was mandated by House Bill 636. Representative Matt Schaefer added an amendment late in the process that required the board to develop and approve an agenda that is to be submitted to the Texas Board of Education for approval, and once approved, made available to Texas high schools to offer plumbing as a part of their curriculum. And once this curriculum has been successfully completed, whether it be in high school or whether it be in a junior college or a trade school, then our job is to allow these graduates who have completed the course successfully to test for a tradesman license. And I want to make something really, really clear. Number one, back in January, my first board meeting and our first board meeting, we made a commitment that we recognized there was a shortage of plumbers in Texas, and we needed to ramp up the pipeline to produce more plumbers. We're just now up to almost 12,000 master plumbers. The average age of those master plumbers are 58 years old. For the benefit and for the survival of this industry, we have got to get young people, more people into the system, working their way up in ability to reach the journeyman plumber, master plumber. The legislature recognized this, and they have created this opportunity for us to develop a curriculum that allows high school students to choose plumbing as a career early on in high school and participate in this program. When they get out of high school, they can take a license as a licensed tradesman. It's important for the industry to know and our board to know that this does not take the place of any other opportunity to get into the plumbing trade. All those other avenues of entry are still available. And as a matter of fact, we have expanded those points of entry when we eliminated the high school diploma requirement. So now even a person who does not have a high school degree, still through their own means, still have an avenue to enter the plumbing trade, work their way up, and become tradesmen, journeymen, master plumbers. There are 2 or 3 different options. So it's important to note that this does not eliminate or replace any existing program that we have. It's an additional pathway that's being opened up to allow more plumbers to enter the industry, which I think everyone, whether it's the plumbing industry, the consumer, we're all going to benefit from it. In that regard, it's no secret that I have been working for the last 6 months with TSTC, who already has a plumbing program. And I asked Robbie Janos and Ron to go with me to Waco to review their curriculum, to look at their plumbing program, to meet their instructors. And Robbie and Ron, both master plumbers, have really done a lot of work in looking at the curriculum that was offered at TSTC. And I believe, and I'm going to turn this over to Ron to talk about this in just a minute, but I think that you will. I know Robbie feels this way, and I feel pretty certain that Ron does too. They do a really good job through a focused and intense training, provide the requisite skills to take the tradesman exam. So by opening this additional pathway, we think we can attract more young men and women into the industry. And when they get out of school, not only have a job, but have a career. Plumbing is a career. It's not just a job. So by opening up this pathway, we think that it's going to be really good for the industry. There are a lot of plumbing companies out there and master plumbers who need really good people. And we hope that this is going to help fill that void. The one thing that is not included in this curriculum, Lisa, Ron, and Robbie and TSTC, we've all talked about it, is the only thing that is not included that'll be required of all these graduates is they take the 10-hour OSHA course. That is not included in the curriculum. And we believe it essential that they take that. Number one, it's called for in the statute. Number two, our current CE providers and trainers, it's readily available in the industry for everyone to take it. So it's not a shortage. So we've got plenty of capacity to offer this 10-hour OSHA course, and that'll still be required of anyone that takes the tradesman exam entering the industry. Also interesting to note, TSTC, and I can't say enough good things about TSTC, what a huge help they've been. And I'll try not to editorialize too much. But in addition to helping us develop this curriculum, you know, educators speak a different language, certainly a different language from plumbers and a different language from us. They have their own codes and things that are Greek to me, but they have asked their staff to help us develop this by working with Ron and with Robbie, Ron and Robbie. They have developed this curriculum and put it in a format that we can submit it to the Texas Education Agency for approval. They are also offering dual credit. So if one wants to go to high school and enter this program and successfully complete it, they will get credit attending TSTC to continue their education toward a journeyman's associate degree. One that I have committed our board to helping TSTC develop going forward. They don't have it in place right now, but with our help, they plan on putting one in place. So we're trying to create as many pathways for entry into the industry as well as upward mobility once they get here to attract people into the industry. And I cannot thank enough TSTC, Ron and Robbie for the work that they've done and really scrutinizing the courses and peeling the onion back and seeing what they're actually teaching these students. Thanks a lot, Ron and Robbie. We really do appreciate your hard work. So with that being said, Ron, do you want to tell us a little bit about the curriculum that we're submitting to the board today for approval?
Thank you, Chairman. In all fairness, this deal I'm presenting, Robbie did the work. I went with Frank and I've observed and got to see all this firsthand, but I'm only disappointed that Robbie wasn't able to be here today. For I don't know how many years he's been on this board. This has been a goal of his. It's coming to fruition. So I take no credit other than as a new board member, I got asked to go into this thing and probably have a level of excitement in the industry that I've not had before. And just a couple of things before we get in this, I won't take long. I was thinking as I was asked to do this over the last 3 years, what has our industry been through since Sunset? I agree with Frank. There were a lot of things in Sunset that certainly needed to be addressed. There's also a lot of defense for Lisa and her staff with some budgetary issues as to why some of those things weren't done. But let's skip forward, or let's start before Sunset. There were many in our industry, myself to a degree, were quite frustrated with trying to get people licensed at the time it took to get somebody down here. And in the industry, I heard lots of complaints about the state plumbing board. We go through a sunset. The governor does an emergency measure, or we wouldn't be here today. And ends up, it probably was the best thing that happened to us, because 71K Plumbing Strong was formed, an industry that was frustrated with the board, unanimously, almost unanimously, in unity, fought for the board. And I found that very ironic, how strong that was. But it kicked us into this deal. And when I joined, we were discussing, Frank, about how we could increase testing. And I mentioned the word TSTI, the former name of Texas State Technical College. It was Institute. That's how long it had been since I've been involved. And Frank went right in there and made the connections. Like he said, Robbie and I went with him. I don't think I've ever been more impressed with the program. Now, that being said, I do not want to forget our plumbing union in the state. They've set the gold standard for training. I think they do a phenomenal job. It's mainly in our major metropolitan areas where those opportunities exist, but we got a very large state where those opportunities don't exist. So for the non-union people in the industry, we needed to develop a curriculum for training. And as I went through TSTC, I thought, man, when I was a young man, if I'd have had this, I could have accelerated through this. And they do such a phenomenal job. So again, it's another opportunity. We don't want to take anything from the union program. But I don't know if you have some of you don't have the packet here, but there's a chart that a proposed curriculum has been developed, which consists of 15 semester credit hours that these high school kids could do over 2 years. So there's 5 categories. Each of those have 2 hours a week of lecture, 4 hours a week of lab. So that's 96 contact hours in if my math's right, a 16-week semester, which counts for 3 semester hours. So each of the 5 is worth 3 semester hours. Ends up with these students having a total in each semester of 480 contact hours. That's pretty good. So those 5 areas, and I'm just sit here and read them, and I'm kind of going, wow, again, if I were young, this would be great. Is basic blueprint reading for plumbers. It's an introductory level course, provides students an introduction into reading, interpreting working drawings, includes being able to recognize symbols, abbreviations, the use of sketching techniques to create isometric and orthographic drawings of drain, waste, and vent, hot and cold water, and gas piping components. The end of the course outcomes include the ability to interpret and sketch isometric drawings and gas piping components. Item 2, plumbing codes. It's, again, an introductory level course to cover state and local plumbing codes, the application of potable water, wastewater, gas systems relating to residential and light commercial settings. And at the end of the course, they will be able to identify, differentiate, and explain the sections of the state and local building codes pertaining to plumbing and describe basic public health and safety related to plumbing systems. Course 3, introductory level course. Course provides instruction into the practices and procedures employed by a plumber, including public relations. The end of the course outcomes include the identification and repair of various types of DWV and water supply systems and application of general principles of public relations. I think that's a very important one that as an industry, customer relations in our business and Ben, I think you'll agree that that's a pretty important skill also. So you're going to see this frequently. Fourth, piping and standards piping standards and materials. An intermediate level course, it includes identification, description, application of piping standards and specifications, includes identification of various metallic and non-metallic piping materials, identification, installation of valves, and material takeoffs. The outcome of this course is to include identification of metallic and non-metallic pipe and tubing, interpret pipe specification, describe various types of valves and fittings, and explain valve applications. Very important stuff that you understand what our materials are for. And then the fifth is intermediate level course on residential construction plumbing. The course object is the skill development and the procedures and techniques employed by a plumber in the rough in and top out stages of a new home or remodeling of an older home. The end course outcomes are rough in drain, waste, and vent pipes, install domestic water lines, gas lines, and segment control valves. So these 5 areas, you've got codes, you've got how to read a set of plans, the repair business, the materials, and some new construction. I think it paints a very, very broad brush that in that 2-year period, if I were in my business to hire someone, they're probably going to get put with a licensed plumber and be specific to what that plumber does. So I think these guys are going to have, again, parallel to the union course, you're going to get a wide cross section of plumbing. And there was some discussion. Someone came out of this. They sat down for the tradesman test here in Austin and passed it. They would get issued a tradesman license. I think one of the things we're going to have to look at, and what suggestion I've heard, is if they fail to pass it, then they have to go work for a year before they can come back, sit down, and take it again. I think that's something we're going to have to decide as a board. I think it's a fair thing that you need a little. Now you do need some on-the-job training. So I'm going to editorialize to close a little bit here. This deal that happened to our plumbing board, from sunset through the governor to restaffing the board, I think there's 2 major changes. One is this program mandated by the legislature to provide training into the industry. And 2, Robbie has been working very hard along with Frank and myself on changes to our continuing education program to make it more applicable for people and where they're at in the plumbing profession. I think those 2 changes are probably going to have, in my opinion, and Lisa may disagree, but they may have the most positive impact on this board since their inception. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my presentation for Robbie.
Thank you, Ron, and again, thank you, Robbie. The material that Ron has been talking about is found in your board books under section 1. It's presented in 2 parts. Number 1 is the page 1 is kind of a narrative, and page 2 lays it out in educational terms with the proper codes that'll be submitted to the Texas Education Agency for their approval. I think this is monumental, and even that it was passed by the legislature played right into our hands, because this is exactly what we need. We need pathways for plumbers to enter the industry. That's been a problem for years and years and years. And we owe a debt of gratitude. We talk a lot about Representative Thompson and her help and her fight for the plumbing industry. Justifiably, she did a great job. But I tell you, we also owe a debt of gratitude, I believe, to Matt Schaefer, who offered this amendment late in the process to provide yet another pathway to get young men and women interested in the plumbing as a career. In my opinion, and I felt this way before I ever got on this board, high school curriculums 10, 15 years ago shifted. There used to be, when I was a kid, an area called shop. You could take shop in school. If college wasn't for you, there was another way to train you to be employable once you got out of high school. Somehow or another, it became so important to get a college degree that all these curriculums shifted for college preparatory classes, and the building trades and the shop portion of it fell by the wayside. And this is a way to reintroduce that into the high school system, to let young people know that there are honorable ways to make a living and make a really good living with a good career and a profession other than going to college. I look around today and I see all these college graduates that are flipping hamburgers at McDonald's that really, had they had the opportunity to do something like this, they could be making six figures by now, had they have gone ahead and entered an honorable occupation such as the plumbing industry. So I think it's a wonderful program. I am really pleased that Robbie and Ron took the time to look at this curriculum with a critical eye to be sure that it gave these people who have completed this course the minimal skills in order to take the tradesman exam. And I'm very, very comfortable with this for two reasons. In January, I made a commitment. We were not going to dumb down the test. So the tests these graduates will be taking are the identical tests that everyone else is taking. And the way I look at it, they either pass it or they don't pass it. And if they pass it, they meet the minimum qualifications to hold a tradesman license. If they don't, I consider it to be a work in progress. This curriculum that we're approving for high school, it should also be noted, is not exclusive to high schools. TSTC is going to adopt the same curriculum. Let's say a person chooses not to enter it in high school. They want to go ahead and get a high school diploma. Then they can go to TSTC and start with this same curriculum and get it in a trade school. It is absolutely not exclusive to TSTC. This curriculum is available to any educational institution in the state of Texas as outlined in the statute that meet the definition in the statute. So if you're a junior college, if you're a trade school, this is not an exclusive program for TSTC. You're welcome to implement it, and we will treat your graduate students exactly as we treat any other graduate student that completes this curriculum. So I'm real excited about it. I think it's going to be fundamentally earth-shattering for this industry to get more young people involved and on an upward pathway for upward mobility in the industry, something we desperately need. When you've got the top of the food chain at master plumber with an average age of 58, it's scary to me to think 5 or 10 years down the road if we don't do something like this in order to get more people in the industry. Texas is the most dynamic economy in the United States, and we have got to do our part to keep up. Now, we're not doing anything. The industry will be doing it, and the students and the young people. But our role as government is to get the hell out of the way. Let's don't put impediments or block roadblocks for folks to enter the industry. Our primary concern is the protection of the public. The industry will they'll meet the needs. I have utmost confidence in the free enterprise system and the plumbing companies out there. They're going to do what it takes to get the job done. And our job is to create minimum standards, which provides protection to the public, which we have done, and we have not monkeyed with the testing requirements whatsoever. But it creates another pathway. So any questions or discussion among the board about this program or how it's going to work?
Mr. Chairman, I have comment. First of all, I think it's been more than 15 years since you were in hospital shot. No, I have not spoken with Ben, who's the other representative from the industry, and he may totally disagree with this. I don't know, but I'd be interested to hear your comments, Ben.
This is a great start, and I think it should also apply to the trade associations that already have Department of Labor approved status, that they could use this curriculum as well, such as PHCC. They're already have got a program, as you know, that is similar to or consistent with this program. And so, like you said, I think everybody should have access to it, whether it's a trade school, a high school, community college, what have you. It should also be as part of the associations that are trying to bring people up into the industry. I did not have this type of curriculum when I was young. I never wanted to be a plumber, but I found my way into it, and the basics and the theory behind all of it as to why we do what we do is very, very important. It even breaks down to as simple as, why do you primer a PVC fitting before you put the glue on it? There's a reason why you do that, so it stays in place over a long period of time. So things like that get down into the weeds about how you do things and why you do things, I think is really, really important. I think a lot of individuals these days want to learn just to pass the test and get into the system. And then it's up to the owner of the company, the master, to teach them on the job. This gives them a way to not only just learn on the job, but actually get the fundamentals into their mind, so that when they do come and take the test, it's more, it sits well in their mind. They feel more comfortable, because I know a lot of people have a hard time taking tests. I know I did. But thankfully, I passed mine on the first try. But we are a minimum standard industry. And if you can pass the test based on the minimum standards, then you should be able to do work in the field. And I think this is a really, really good start.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Ron, also for pointing out where I was 15 years ago. I wasn't in high school. As a matter of fact, 15 years ago, I was almost eligible for Social Security. So, so I guess you are right about that. Maybe it was 55 years ago. I don't know. One thing, and Ben mentioned the PHCC program, Ron mentioned the union program. The beauty part of this, there is a critical need for both PHCC and the union programs. And I have actually visited every one of them and gone through them. They are outstanding programs. But it offers a different pathway, because for instance, the union program, I visited 6 of the union training programs that do it. They have classes. They have 2 hours class per night, 2 nights a week. During the day, they work all day long. So this is not for everyone. Some people have to go to work and earn a living. And by having the PHCC program and the union program, they're allowed to work at the same time as getting their training. This program allows someone, if they choose to either get it in high school when they can, or when they get out of high school, get it from trade school or a junior college or a trade or someone else, and get intense focus training. Where the union and PHCC program is stretched out over 5 years, this is compacted and focused and specific strictly to the plumbing industry. Full-time student. So they're both getting it, but it's not made for everyone. Everyone doesn't have the luxury of going to a trade school or to a junior college. They've got to get to work. And I think PHCC and the union program provide them that opportunity, and we couldn't do without them. They're critical to our industry. We need it all. So as I said earlier, this is not to eliminate any program. It's to add an additional pathway of entry and upward mobility within our industry. And I think all of our board and everyone that I've talked to in the industry supports that premise. I don't think there's one plumber or CE provider or anyone that knows anything about plumbing that's complaining about us having too many plumbers. Not one person has said that when I've been all over Texas talking to them. It's desperate to get more plumbers into the industry to meet the needs and the dynamics of the economy in Texas. This isn't a problem for some podunk state that's got a 2% economic growth rate. Well, Texas has averaged 15% for the past 10 years. I mean, we're leading the nation in growth, and we have got to rise to the occasion. And this is a big step, in my opinion, of fitting the need. So, any other comments or questions before I call for a vote on submitting this to the Texas Education Agency? All done? Okay. Is there a motion to approve this curriculum for submission to the Texas Education Agency for approval?
So moved. Milton.
Milton Gutierrez moves. Is there a second?
I'll second. Ben Friedman.
Second by Ben Freeman. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I think this is a huge, huge step, and I hope that the industry appreciates the work that the board members have put in trying to develop this program. And if you see Matt Schaefer, thank him for adding that amendment to House Bill 636, because I think he's from Tyler, isn't he? And it's funny, I talked to Matt Schaefer after the legislative session closed, and I said, I want to make sure that we have the legislative authority to go forward with this. And he sat me down and he said, you know what, Frank, you not only have the legislative authority, you've got the mandate to do it. So get busy. So one of the first things I'm going to do is text him that the board has approved a curriculum for submission to Texas Education Agency, and tell him the ball's in their court. So, all right. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 6, which is discussion of administrative penalty guidelines. Milton and Ben, I had asked them in our last board meeting to take a look at this. Is Steve Davis online with us? Lisa's shaking her finger at me.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. I want to be sure you participate in this. Yes, Lisa? That's what you get for trying to correct your chairman now. It's not right. Okay. So Ben, Milton, Steve, after looking over and this is not something has been identified as a problem, but I think it's prudent that we often look at what's already in place. So Ben or Milton, if you've got any observations or comments about what is currently in place, or Steve, who's our Director of Enforcement, I'd also ask at some point, Steve, is there anything you need in order to do your job better that we could address on our penalty matrix and guidelines? So Ben or Milton, turn it over to you.
Okay, I'll go first. I've read through this. The process seems pretty smooth. If one does get a complaint filed against them, this is pretty laid out to a T as to how things are going to work. What's going to happen, when you get the complaint, what's going to happen in the process, and what you have to do as a respondent. I think that the table itself of the fines looks pretty good. Obviously, the fines aren't meant to hurt anybody's business, but it's meant to, like a traffic citation. You get caught going from 75 to 40 in 1/8 of a mile, you're going to have a pretty big fine because you're not paying attention. And this just happened to my boy, actually, so it's top of mind. The $245 citation coming into Wichita Falls. But you really need to pay attention as a master plumber as to who you're doing work with and who you're doing work for, and making sure that you've got the right people on the job. If you don't pull a permit or you send out an apprentice that's unsupervised and you're caught, that's a big deal. And it's really all about the consumer with this penalty matrix. I mean, this is all to protect the consumer. It's not to, as the perception is in the licensing arena, to hurt the licensee. It's meant to keep them in line and to do the right thing. So when we talk about all these kids coming up and all these adults coming up into the industry, there are rules that you have to play by. And I'm dealing with a couple in my own business right now that we don't have any complaints against us, obviously, but customers of mine that have had problems with other plumbers that are coming to me asking how this works if they decide to file a complaint. If I was a consumer looking at this process, it makes perfect sense to me how to file a complaint and how to go about it and how long you have to wait before somebody responds. To the licensee, they just need to do the right thing. And if there is a complaint that's filed against them and they've got a legitimate reason why they think they did the right thing, then they have the opportunity to prove it. That's my initial thought. The penalties themselves, I think, are adequate. They're enough to make somebody nervous that, you know, they're going to have a big chunk of money out of their pocket if they do something wrong. So the key is to just have it in place in case there's an issue. And if there is an issue and somebody is found at fault, then they know exactly what they're going to pay. Assuming that it's, you know, within these parameters. Obviously there's other situations that they could be fined more or less. But I think it's pretty well laid out here, and the masters should be taking notice of this if they find themselves in a situation that they need to find a way out of.
With respect to the penalties themselves, and we have Class A, Class B, Class A being the more severe that have a tendency to affect public health or safety. Class B are more administrative, non-egregious. Do you find them to be acceptable as they are? Or do you think, and I'm not asking to change it. I'm just seeking input. And I think it's a good, prudent thing to do for us to take a look at everything we do, because we need to create a culture at our agency, and I say this to employees as well as to our board, of continuous process improvement. Once we feel that we have perfected something, we need to start working on improving it. So good enough will never be good enough as far as I'm concerned. The best ideas with respect to practices in the industry are not going to come from the boardroom, they're going to come from the workplace floor. So I include employees in this because the best people to tell you the most efficient, effective way to get the job done, talk to the person that's actually doing the job. So in 40 years of business, the best ideas have come from the workplace floor, not from the boardroom. So I would encourage staff, when we're talking about efficiency and safety and things that we need, speak up, because you're going to get a very receptive management and board. If you've got a great idea, bring it to us. So Steve, is there anything, or Milton, did you have anything you wanted to add before I ask Steve to weigh in on this?
As I was looking through this, one thing that came to mind was just to see what has been the trends. I feel like if there's a recurring violation that keeps coming up over and over again, maybe it seems that the penalty is not high enough, that people might say, well, it's all right, I can pay that off, you know, I can get away with it. So for me, it's like, would be a question for Steve would be, you know, what are maybe the top 5 or top 10 violations that keep recurring over and over again that people just seem to violate it without any sense of like, oh, I got something, you know, or I've been penalized. Oh, you know, it's going to hurt me when it really isn't. And seeing about maybe, do we need to increase those penalties? And then the other thing is, I looked at the matrix through the eyes of my wife, as being a citizen representative. And the ones where I felt like I focused on were the ones where there is fraud, where there is just that trust is broken. I think as an industry, it's an industry based on trust. You're trusting. A plumber going into a home, again, looking at my wife's eye, through my wife's eyes, or through my eyes, like, okay, I'm at work. She is in Georgetown, and she's getting a plumber. I'm trusting that plumber is licensed, that they're professional, that they've done everything that they need to do to be able to do the job. And so some of the things here, like falsely claiming that they're a licensed plumber, falsely claiming that they have secured the service of a responsible master plumber, employing an unlicensed or unregistered person, representing services provided or services to be provided, allowing illegal use of a responsible master plumber license. Those were some of the things that I was like, do we need to increase those or look at those? Are those recurring or not? Because mainly because of those are, if you can't trust a person going in there doing the right thing, then we need to rethink how we're licensing people and allowing people to practice.
Steve, you heard the comments. Is there anything inherently that's a part of our current guidelines? And I will emphasize they are guidelines in many cases. And Milton, I totally agree with you. Those areas of misrepresentation of their services or lying or defrauding a customer, I don't think it gets any worse than that. We can't legislate integrity and morality. And unfortunately, the only tool we have is the penalty matrix. But some people don't like enforcement, but compliance without enforcement is impossible. You have to have enforcement, and you've got to make it hurt. I'm going to tell a story I shouldn't tell, but it's very brief. In a previous life, I had 200 over-the-road trucks that I was responsible for. And this was 30 years ago. But the Department of Public Safety started cracking down on overweight loads. And it didn't take me long to figure out it was cheaper for me to run overweight and pay the ticket because I could make more revenue on the haul than the ticket cost me. So I didn't quit doing it. Finally, the Department of Public Safety wised up and they started parking our trucks until we unloaded that overweight load. Then it became a reason you start loading them properly. So you've got to have enforcement in order to have compliance. And it's got to be, the cost of non-compliance has got to be more expensive than the cost of breaking the rules. So Steve, what comments, if any, you've mentioned me in the past that you might want to add some items that are not currently included?
Yeah, there's at least three that I had that I've penciled in. Two of them have to do with the different, as far as failure to cooperate with an investigation. We have one rule for failure to cooperate with a field investigator while performing a on-site compliance check, and then also for failure to cooperate with an investigation. Unfortunately, those have popped up a couple of times, not a lot, but something that we're at least needed to go in and note the board rule for easy reference along with a penalty amount. Then the other thing had to do with improper inspection by a licensed plumbing inspector. That was one thing that kind of popped up. So there's just as you said, the guideline is just a guideline, and it's not everything that the committee can look at and write a penalty for, but it makes it much easier if we've got that available. It's available for the public to see and see what the that schedule is, how it's set up. As far as the classes, I don't really think I kind of agree that they're in proper perspective right now. The question I would have for a committee, and I really would like, input, would be for, we do offer settlement on the initial penalty. That's if they don't have a previous, and that's and this developed over time. It wasn't something that we just implemented. I think initially when I first came involved, I think it was 50%. But since after discussions from legal and even some input from some other attorneys with the Attorney General's office and now one of the judges over there, that we might look at maybe as far as especially for collections. So we reduced down to 25% for the first, then increasing it goes up by the if there's a fourth within a period of time, a short period of time, then that's when they go into probated suspension of a license, which is depending on the class. It could be a probated suspension for 1 year or for 6 months. If they do have another complaint of that similar nature within that period of time, then it would go to full suspension, and it would be for a full year. So once it gets to that point, then they see it's getting really serious. But and then also in reference to maybe increasing the penalty amounts, one of the most, and it's really become one of the, I guess I understand it, but failure to take out a permit has to do with willfully, negligently, arbitrarily, failure to, it's in violation of municipal code or ordinance. And that would include either failure to take out a permit or improper installation. Now, those increased up to the full 5,000, which again, they were increasingly getting more and more popular and still seem to be today. Contracting was typically our most common when it came down to the reports for each quarterly board meeting, but not taking out a permit is really getting on up there. So those are some things that can be resolved through the company. But again, it's getting on up there, and it's causing a lot of masters get their license suspended. And again, it's something that they have control over. So, but any input that we can get that has to do with whether you're happy with the settlement amounts that are offered, whether you want to increase those penalty amounts, we're all open for recommendations and discussion, and be glad to input whatever.
Steve, I want to just weigh in on the settlement business. I for one, think that what the final settlement is determined by the staff, not by our board. We're not going to look at these individual cases. We approve the agreed orders once they're in place, and you got to justify them. But if we've got, and I don't know this is the case, but if we have a carte blanche procedure that we send to everyone a settlement offer that's a percentage of what the original complaint was, I'm against it. Because to me, a reduction in what we already have in place and what we've published as guidelines would only be determined for extraordinary circumstances. I might look at reducing it if someone has taken remedial action and fixed the problem before you ever got there. If your case is not as strong as what you might think it should be in order to take it to SOA, you could discount it. But I don't think there should be any uniform reduction in any fee in order to settle it. I mean, the guideline is what it is, and whatever your initial recommendation is what it is. And if you want to look at them individually and for some other reason, I think that's well within your discretion. But I don't see a blanket reduction on these guidelines. The guidelines are what they are. I think one other thing I want to mention that I was thinking about as you were talking, Steve, House Bill 636 eliminate some language having to do with enforcement committee and things like that. I personally, even that the language has been deleted and it's not gonna be titled an enforcement committee. I know you have in place a protocol and a procedure set up where you and several of your investigators look at cases and come up with the recommendation. And I guess that's the enforcement committee. Just because the name is going to change doesn't mean we want to change what you're doing. I wholeheartedly support, and I think you've got a really good program to review these cases and come up with an equitable recommendation. And I think you've utilized all your staff. And just because it's been eliminated in the statute doesn't mean that you have to change what you're doing. Basically, Steve pulls together several of his investigators that are not directly involved, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, that are not directly involved in the investigation.
That's
and
correct.
Those other investigators actually, they challenge that investigator to be sure that he's or she has dotted the I's and crossed the T's before they come up with something. And I think that's
putting it
healthy.
mildly.
Yeah, I think that's healthy. And I think it's fair to the respondent. It's to make sure that we have done our job and nobody's going to be tougher on an investigator than another investigator. So I think
that's the way it's played out.
Just because there's some change in the language in the statute doesn't mean that I want to stop that, because I think you've developed a really good program. And I think the thing that I would like to do, Steve, is you've heard the comments of the board and you've got some of your own. At our next board meeting, I would like to put on the agenda modifications or adjustments to our current penalty matrix and guidelines. And you come up with them. And if need be, bounce it off Milton and Ben, so that at our next meeting, you mentioned a couple of things that you wanted on there that are not currently on there. Why don't you put them on there? And I would say this to those who are listening who are plumbers. I would welcome input from the plumbing industry. If you think they're not hard enough, or if you think they're too stringent, we've got an email that's kind of a general email, do we not, Lisa, that people can just sign in and make comments about?
We have the ability to do a pre-rule comment, so to speak, once we get some format out there. We can sure put it out there. That'd be interesting, actually.
Well, you know, that worked pretty well when we did our continuing education. And I would like, does the board feel okay about that and support us doing that? I think let's put out there that we are currently looking at our penalty matrix and guidelines, and have Steve develop some adjustments that he wants. But I'd be interested in some input from the plumbers. Now, plumber, if you tell us that we don't want any penalties and we don't want anything, I'm gonna throw it in the trash. So be realistic in what you're suggesting. And I know many plumbers will, and I value their input. So if we will set up a way on our website that you can do a pre-comment period even before we do a rule change. And we'll take that in, and if you will, Lisa, figure out a way to funnel those to Steve, and Steve can talk to Milton and Ben about it. And at our next meeting, Steve, you can bring us some recommendations as to adjustments to our penalty guidelines.
Okay.
Frank,
Yes, sir.
let me just say, you know, there's a big presence online, social media with the plumbers. And so the conduits that are currently out there, they can push that through there too, where maybe they can compile those and send them in, or plumbers can send them in directly to your email address, because there's a lot of talk about this online too. So I just want everybody out there to know that your voice will be heard one way or another.
It will, but we need direct comment from the plumbers. I don't want us to get in a situation where we're having to peruse all these social media sites to come up with comments. If it's important enough to a plumber to make a post about it on Facebook, he can take 10 minutes and send us an email. And that way we can get it officially. And somebody doesn't complain, well, I posted something on Facebook and you didn't say a word about it. We can't be chasing social media all over the country.
No, of course not. But it's just there's a lot of people online. So
I totally agree,
Yeah.
but I don't want that to be an official comment site.
no, of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not.
So, Lisa, did you have something to say?
I wanted to can you hear me? I'm having to turn Steve off and on, but I want to make a comment. In your board books, if you look at the penalties, the way they're set up now and the settlement amounts, you'll also see, and we can talk about it a little bit more when we get to that item, there's also a previous violator list in there. And that is an issue that we want to address. I'm on topic with Milton on that. And in order to get it out to everyone so we can get their comments, I think I'd like to do it as a survey. We have a way to do rule comment, but that's a whole proposal process, and we can do it like we did CE. I think the survey process would be great, and we'll put it out in a format to what might become a rule proposal, but they can actually click on it and do the survey. And Kevin, as our communication expert now, can funnel it all into one place for everyone to review.
I think it's a wonderful idea, and Ben agrees. Whatever we can do to get input from the industry is I'm for it.
This will be interesting.
Well, I mean, you can almost predict what's going to be there, and I want to tell the industry in advance we're going to get a lot of, well, you let all these unlicensed, people go and what do they call them? Something in a truck, chucking a truck without licenses. You go.
Proper terminology.
I mean, I hear it all the time, but also I want the industry to understand that Steve, as director of enforcement, has got 8 inspectors located across the state to take care of how many people? What have we got? 16, 18, 20 something million people in the state of Texas, isn't it? 28 million or something. So when I looked at Steve's report, they're doing a lot. There's no question they're not doing everything, but they're doing a lot. So I would ask the industry to be a little bit patient. And I know Steve prioritizes cases based upon the threat to the public. And if we've got a case that rises to a Class A violation alleged, that goes to the top of the list, as it should. Not to say that unlicensed activity is not a threat to the public, but there's only 8 of them. So they're doing the best they can. And maybe at some point in time in our legislative process, we'll be able to ramp that up in our appropriations request. We had a great session this time, and I expect and anticipate a better session next time. So that's certainly going to be on our list. But as people comment, keep in mind, we've got 8 inspectors covering the state of Texas. So there are limits to how much they can do. So anything else on enforcement?
Ben Friedman, I think that's a very good point, that there are only 8 inspectors out there, and the perception is that we don't do anything out there, and we all know that that's not true. I think that something that was mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago online actually was the authority of the city inspector to help us enforce rules. And they may or may not be doing that part of their job, but I do hear a lot of comments about how inspectors are on the job, they're checking licenses, not checking licenses, whatever. And if there's a problem on a job, that we're not being notified of any sort of violations of the rules that currently exist. So I would just say to all the licensed inspectors out there that if you see something, say something, because if we don't know about it, it's only the consumer that gets hurt in this process. People who hire unlicensed people, that, you know, to me, that's on them. They need to check the credentials and not necessarily focus on price, because that's what most people focus on, is price. And sometimes you don't get the best service for the lowest price, especially if you're hiring somebody that you don't even know if they have a license or not. So it really falls back on the consumer, and it falls on the honorable licensed plumber to communicate to that homeowner that this is why you want to work with somebody with a license. I'm happy to show you my license. I'm happy to introduce you to the people that are going to be working in your house. And this is what you're paying for, and this is the value you're receiving. So I think everybody's got to be involved in the enforcement process, not just our folks, but the consumers that are hiring people, to make sure that they're getting what they're supposed to be getting.
Thanks, Ben. I totally agree with you. And I also would relate back to what we're doing to increase the number of plumbers. We've created our own. There is unlicensed activity in Texas because there's not enough licensed plumbers to meet the demand that's out there. And by what we're doing, by increasing the pathways and the numbers of plumbers, if given the opportunity, I firmly believe in my heart, a consumer, if given the choice of hiring someone with a license who you know have got the skills and has been vetted through criminal background checks, and some jackleg that they don't know that is unlicensed, the consumer is going to select the licensed plumber. So we have, as an industry, have fallen short and created a niche out there for that unlicensed person, because there's not enough licensed people to get around to all the. So as we increase the numbers of licensed plumbers, I totally anticipate the numbers of unlicensed plumbers to go down, because a consumer, if given the, and we have to do our job to promote the use of licensed plumbers. You guys, I distributed to each of you a press release that we're sending to all the members of the legislature about winterizing your home. The number one item on the agenda: hire a licensed plumber. So we had distributed this to every member of the legislature in hopes that they'd put it in their newsletters to their constituents. So we are going, as an agency, are going to promote the use of licensed plumbers in everything we do. During the winter storm, I guess I did 10 or 15 TV interviews, and the first thing I told them, wait for a licensed plumber. It'll be prudent for you and save you money in the long run. Be patient and wait for a licensed plumber. And I think all of us are going to have to do that. And we're going to have to do it, Kevin, through our communication. Every piece of communication is to encourage the consumer to use licensed plumbers who've been vetted and have the minimum skills. And we'll tackle it. It's going to always be a problem for as long as we're around, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop working. So,
well, Frank, I appreciate you saying that, because that's very, very important. Very important.
Anyone else on enforcement thoughts? Steve, are you clear on what we're asking of you?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, at our next meeting, and Lisa, be sure to help me remember to put on our agenda possible rule revisions concerning our penalty guidelines and matrix. So, and this is not a one-time shot, I should also say. These rules are something that we can modify and fix as we need to, as we go forward. But since I've been on the board, we've never looked at this, and it's something that I wanted to look at, and I'd like to get some industry comment on it. As we'll do a lot of things, but this doesn't mean it's one time and done. If we see something 3 months or 4 months down the road that needs to be modified or fixed, we'll fix it. So it's 10:15. We've been going about an hour and 15 minutes. Does everyone want a 5-minute break before we get into our Lisa's executive director report? So it's about 14 after 11. We'll reconvene at 11:20. So let's adjourn for just 5 minutes. Back to order. It's 11:26. As usual, I'm 5 minutes late and $1 short. But anyway, we're back. We're going to deviate a little bit off of our posted agenda. And we were down to Lisa and her executive director report. But I think since we're going to take about a 50-minute break for lunch, it might fit to Lisa, if you will introduce our new employees that we have added. And when you're done with that, we're going to ask our Aaron and Julie to make their presentation before lunch. And as soon as they're done, we'll break for 45 minutes for lunch, which I have supplying in our conference room. It should be here in a minute for the board members and attendees. If you'd like to join us, you're welcome to. So that's what we're going to do. And then you will pick up the rest of your report when we return from lunch, Lisa. So if you'll do your introductions, we'll then turn it over to Aaron and Julie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everyone hear me, I hope? We're excited because we have the opportunity to hire some additional and much needed staff. And in the search, we want to make sure we find just the right person. But in July, we actually added another examiner, and that is Elliot Jones right here. Elliot, if you want to stand up, and or Elliot, if you want to look in the camera, you can, so everybody knows what you look like. So we're really excited to have Elliot. Elliot's a licensed plumber. We threw him in there, and so far he's done really good, and he's came back every day. So we're happy for that. And as a reminder, we have another position for an examiner we'd like to hire. It's posted on our website. And the big reminder is that after the last board meeting, the 31st of July, Neil retired, our chief examiner. So it's been a little tough, and but we're going to make it, and we're happy to have Elliot. In addition, we recently hired 2 more individuals. We hired, and what we're going to call them, they'll be criminal analysts, which they're going to help with fingerprints and a variety of review and that sort of thing. And they've been training really hard all week, and they come to us with really good credentials. We have Ames, a wool, and if you haven't had a chance to visit with Ames, visit with Ames. Ames comes from the Senate. He did a lot of work during the legislature. As soon as we saw he was available, we scooped him up. We weren't going to let him get away. We put all the carrots that we had out there, so we hope he stays for a little bit. I think he'll be really good. And we're equally excited is that we have Ashley, who has a background in criminology and has been working some security detail. In addition, Ashley is a veteran and was in the Navy. So we're really excited about what all we have and who all we have, and we hope to get more. So thank y'all for sitting through all of this, and you're welcome to go back to your grueling schedules now.
Before you head back, I want to personally welcome all of you to the agency. You are desperately needed. Elliot, I feel like you've been here for 10 years, even that you just started in July. I see you all the time. So thank you. And to Ames and Ashley without an E, right? Okay. Welcome to the both of you. I hope that you really enjoy your time here. I think that you will. Be sure to let us know what your goals are, and we'll do the best that we can to help you accomplish your goals as you help us accomplish ours. One of the strengths of working for a small agency like the plumbing board versus one of these mega big agencies, you're not cubby holed, and we don't draw lines around. As you've already found out, Ames, you may have been hired for something, but you do everything. And I'll tell you that we had 2 in preparation for our meeting today. We had 2 employees that I hope they're not embarrassed about calling them. I'm not going to call them out by name. We had a couple of employees that are key members of our staff who were out blowing off the parking lot at 6 o'clock last night in preparation for having guests here. And I tell you, it is such an inspiration to me to see those employees that do things beyond what their job is. No one told them to do it. They did it happily. They did it because they have pride in their work. And they are an inspiration to me. And I hope that you are inspired also. That there's no vocabulary for "it's not my job" in the plumbing board. When something needs to be done, we all pitch in and help. Don and Kevin, it takes a lot of work to set these meetings up. And so many times we take the logistics of doing this for granted. Now, this isn't what they were hired to do, but they're doing it. And it's just an example of the advantage to working with a small agency. You get an opportunity to do a lot and interact with a lot of people and help in a lot of ways. So I hope this job is fulfilling to you. I hope you enjoy it. And I hope we meet your personal goals too, whatever they might be. So welcome aboard. We're glad to have you. Gosh knows we need you worse than anything. So Lisa?
I want to add one thing, and it slipped my mind. Our purchaser also retired in July. And so we have another individual, Alex, and Alex has been with us for quite a while. And he was here as a temporary person, but now we've moved him over into the purchasing. And so one of the reasons why he's not here is I think he's going to pick up lunch, but he's learning to do a variety of jobs, as you just mentioned. So Alex has become permanent now, so we're thankful to have him as well. So we're a little bit, and I still have other positions, so I want to make that clear. Please look on the website if you're interested. It's a great place to work. That's all.
Thanks a lot, and thank you both. Go to work. Aaron and Julie, I think that the
I believe your
department
video has
is
been turned off, Mr.
okay.
Chair.
Well, okay, it has been turned off, but I don't know how to turn it on. But you don't need to see me anyway. I'm here. The Office of the Regulatory Compliance Division. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to you and take it away. Thanks. There we go.
Don't make Julie turn red.
Very graciously introduced us. I'm Erin Bennett. I'm the director of actually a brand new division in the governor's office, the Office of Regulatory Compliance. This is the division. So we are a very small new office in the governor's office. We were actually created just a couple.
If you could talk into this so that the general public can hear you, it would be helpful. So, yeah. Don't worry about us. Just talk to the microphone.
Just talk to the microphone. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I'll start over again then. Again, my name is Erin Bennett. I am the director of the Regulatory Compliance Division in the Office of the Governor. Julie Davis is the division counsel.
Okay.
We're really excited to be here today. We really appreciate the invitation. We are a brand new division within the Office of the Governor. We were actually just authorized a couple of sessions ago back in 2019. And we have a very distinct role within the governor's office. We review rules that licensing agencies like the Plumbing Board propose in order to assess if they're consistent with state statutes, those rules that affect market competition. So we look at a very, very narrow slice of rules. And again, we want to make sure that when agencies affect competition, they're doing so consistent with what the legislature intended for the agencies to do. I have a little bit of history on these slides, which I think are in y'all's board packet as well. Traditionally, when the state is acted under federal law, generally state actors enjoy immunity under antitrust liability. However, there was a really big case, the Supreme Court decided back in 2015, you may have heard of it. It's the North Carolina Dental Board case. And that case held that when you have boards that are controlled by active market participants, boards like the plumbing board, where a majority of the members are plumbers or associated with the industry, you have to have be acting according to clearly articulated state policy, and you have to be actively supervised by another state entity in order to enjoy that immunity from federal antitrust law. So that was kind of it was a big case in the world of regulatory boards. It was really quite a sea change. You had to have this active supervision in order to have immunity from antitrust law. So that's kind of the impetus that led to our creation by the legislature a few years ago. So our office is the active supervisor of y'all's rule makings that affect market competition. So by us reviewing your rules, the board enjoys immunity from federal antitrust liability. And we think it also provides a huge benefit to the public, to licensees, to people who want to become licensed. It ensures that when y'all act, you're doing so in accordance with what the legislature intended, and it makes sure that Texas is open for business, that people that want to enter the profession, if they're qualified to do so, that they're able to enter the profession, that consumers are protected by there being a lot of plumbers and the profession being open and Texas open for business. So that's a little bit of background about who we are. Julie and I will kind of go through our actual process and how our rule review process works. We review rules from 23 different agencies. The plumbing board is just one of those agencies. We review rules from a lot of the health professions, the medical board, the dental board. We look at the real estate commission's rules, DMV. So it's a variety of occupational licensing boards that send rules to us. We only look at rules that affect market competition. You don't have to send all of the rules that you propose to the register, only those that you determine have a significant impact on market competition. And our statute defines what market competition is. It's a rule that would create a barrier to participating in the profession, or a rule that would result in higher prices or reduced competition for product or service provided by or to a license holder in the state. So there's a lot of rules that fit into those categories. As far as rules that are barriers to market participation, we've looked at rules that create a new training course in order to be licensed. We've looked at rules that increase the number of continuing education hours, that may increase the disqualifications. If you're increasing the number of offenses in your criminal history rule, that might be something we look at. We also look at rules that may make it harder if you're a person that's coming from out of state, if you're a plumber licensed in Louisiana, and there's rules that are making it more difficult or kind of reducing reciprocity. Those are things that we might be interested in looking at. And a lot of these rules, they still may be consistent with statute. They may be perfectly fine. It may be what the legislature wants you to do. We just want to look at that to make sure and just provide that additional protection from antitrust liability, and then also just to make sure that it's in the interest of the state to have these restrictions.
Other types of rules you might want to consider sending to us are the ones that obviously reduce competition or result in higher prices. So these are things that the board was limiting the number of licenses. Issue 100 new licenses a year. This is something you might want to look at. If you were getting like geographic regions where you're saying, oh, only these licenses can practice in this part of Texas, that part of Texas.
Those are things that we're looking at. We also look at rules that
impact the services provided by
licensees too. So if it's making it harder to be a provider or harder to take certain training courses, those are those that might be a good idea to send to us.
State agencies, again, are required to send rules that affect market competition. We can also initiate rules that review rules that affect market competition. So rules come to us a couple of different ways. They either come at the initiation of the agency, or they can come if we see something in the register. And Julie and I, we look at the register where agencies propose rules. We can identify something and ask that be sent to us. We look at new rules, we look at rules that are being repealed, rules that are being amended. We also look at the quadrennial rule review. So if y'all have rules that are undergoing those QRRs, we can initiate reviews of those, which we have. We're not here to talk about those rules today, but we have asked the board to send us some rules that y'all are reviewing as part of your quadrennial review process. I do want to note on this that we can't look at rules that are just in the register in general. They have to be undergoing some sort of review, some sort of change. We can't just pull out a rule that, we've heard it might be causing an issue, but it's not being amended. It's just out there in existence. We can't do that. We can only look at rules that are undergoing. Again, we really just focus on rules that affect market competition. We don't look at all of the rules. And then when we do pull a rule, it's a very formal submission of materials. The board is required to submit the entire administrative record related to the rule, any public comments you received on the rule, any sort of studies or analysis you did. We look at everything when you submit a rule to us. And we also take public comments. So I'll turn it over to Julie, and she's going to talk about our public comment process, a little bit more information about our process.
So this is really where we need the licensees to come into this process. Public comments are really useful for us to build the context of our review. So we accept public comments on every rule proposed. It's a minimum of 10 days. Usually it's 30 days. And we can only consider comments that are in writing from identifiable persons. So we have our email address on our website. We welcome public comments anytime we have a rule for proposal, and we'll get a little bit more on how you can be part of that process and sign up for newsletters. But we also post on our website all the deadlines for submitting comments, all the materials as far as the rule submission memoranda, so you can be informed. Here's what the agency has said. Now, for licensees, we need to know how that rule affects you. So does it cost you something to implement, or will you lose profit as a result of that rule? Will it prevent you from becoming licensed or from accelerating through your tradesman, your journeyman to your masters? That's the kind of context we need. Sometimes rules can be a little unhelpful if you deviate from the rule itself. So let's say you have a rule that increases training requirements. It does not help us if you say, well, the real problem with having so few people in the industry is because exams are too tough. We really need to focus what's on the rule, and like Aaron said, only the rule that's under consideration that's being amended at that time. But we do want a full context, and the licensees are the ones who have to work with the rules, so you guys know best. So whenever we get a rule for review, an agency is not allowed to finally adopt or implement that rule until we have issued a determination letter. Typically, these determination letters approve or disapprove a rule. When we disapprove a rule, we'll give specific or precise instructions for revisions or more general instructions. And there are different ways that an agency can go about revising the rule in those circumstances to adopt it. If we reject a rule, it does have to be amended either pursuant to our precise instructions, or let's say, what we've recommended may not be the best thing for that rule. In those cases, you can make other amendments, and this is a very public process. So whether it has to go back to the register, if it comes to us, we mention those things in our determination letters. And just for some context, most of our rules are approved that we've reviewed. We've only disapproved about 10% of them. And I think that's out of 120 rules that we've identified, and we've reviewed 91. So just to give you some idea, most of the rules that go through our process, we do approve those, but they have to go through that full market analysis and then a determination of whether they're consistent with state policy. All of our determination letters are on our website. They're available to the public at any time. You can go look. We organize them by agency. So if there are some that you're interested in, or maybe you hold multiple licenses, those are always good to look at. So the division's rule review process does have an impact on the timeline for adopting rules. And I think this is something, for licensees who are interested in this process, for the board, especially, and for agency staff, what does that look like for you? So typically agencies have about 180 days to adopt a rule, or 6 months. And usually it takes about 60, maybe up to 100 days, depending on when your board meetings line up and how much you amend a rule. But it looks like this top process up here. So the standard process for all rules starts when an agency proposes it in the register. There's typically a 30-day comment period, and then you propose to adopt the rule. If there are any changes, you need to respond to comments. Our process starts after an agency proposes a rule. Once it's identified, the review will begin once that agency submits the rule to us, whether we've identified it or that agency does. Now, our division has 90 days to do a review. I think our average is 62 days. So we usually get it done much faster, and that includes that public comment period. But our comment period is separate from the agency. So if licensees are concerned, if we submit a comment to the agency, like Aaron said, the agency submits those comments to us. But let's say you have more detailed, specific information, or there's some research that you want to send us, you can send that directly to us, and we'll consider it when we're in our review. And it's actually very helpful to send us things like research, if there are studies, very practical analyses type things. So once we host that separate period, like I said, we get the 90 days to complete our review, and then the rule is either approved or we've disapproved it with precise instructions or general instructions. The rule has to be revised at that point, and then eventually it gets to this adoption phase. So like I said, even though our average is about 62 days, this can substantially add to an agency's timeline for adopting a rule. So, we always ask stakeholders, be patient with the agencies. It's not their fault, but we do try to work with y'all to make sure, if we can get our determination letter out 2-3 weeks faster to meet a board meeting timeline, that way we don't delay it for y'all. We do make an effort to do that with you. Additionally, there is an option for a state agency to request an expedited review. Those are circumstances beyond the agency's control. So if you have a statutory deadline you have to meet, we're going to work with you on that. Those are the circumstances you'll see that 10-day comment period from us instead of that 30. But it just depends on the circumstances.
You're chairman wants to get it done in its life.
Okay.
Emergency situation.
What's your health like? So just so y'all know, we do have an option. You can sign up to receive email notifications on our website. Those usually go out once a month, so we won't flood your inbox, and it'll be very obvious who it's from at that point. We include little summaries of the rules, whether they're approved or disapproved when those determination letters are issued. We just like to keep people informed about what our division is doing. Additionally, our website has the state agencies that are subject to the review, guidance information for the agency. So if you want to see what a state agency has to submit to us, sometimes it's very helpful for your comments. And we do post to our website email notices anytime we receive the rules and we're starting those review within 10 days. And usually it's 2 or 3 days at most, and you'll get those notices out. So it's a really handy feature to go on. And it looks like that. And if you look on the right-hand side, that regulatory compliance email sign up, just throw your email in there. It's very easy. So you can find that on the governor's website at gov.texas.gov. Under the organization tab, you'll see regulatory compliance, and it'll be the first image that pops up. Additionally, we do have our chapter and statute. That'll be subchapter C of chapter 57 in the occupations code. We've also got our own rules, and we've got several of our own rules up for proposal right now, if you'd be interested in looking at those. So that's on our website as well, if you want to take a look at those. But our rules are located in chapter 1 of the Texas Administrative Code, section 5.202 through 2.2. And then again, we have our guidance for affected agencies available online, and then just some background information about the division as well. Any questions?
So,
Go ahead.
you mentioned the expedited rule review. I think an example might be, earlier this year with the freeze, we enacted some emergency rules and some emergency temporary rules. Would those be subject to that expedited review versus having to draw it out?
I love what you do, and I wholeheartedly support it. And I think, Julie, that I am 100% for removing anti-competitive barriers. I am really, really concerned about the length of time and the slowing down these rules. You know, I view what's going on at the plumbing board. We have a sense of urgency to fix a problem. And the last thing we need on earth is something that continues to slow down the problem. I made a comment at one of our previous board meetings that had this been a private organization and us being a private board, we would have fixed this problem in about 60 days. But being a part of a state agency and the processes they have to go through, and they're good ones, but they slow it down so much. Is your timeline set by yourself, or did the legislature set your timeline?
When looking at how offices of supervision are set up, there's a big emphasis on accepting public comment. So I think baking that part into our process is really where a lot of the time is built in, having that 30-day public comment. But I do think that gives us the ability to do a more robust view. We do want the license holders, we want the public to be able to comment on the rules and look at them specifically from a competition standpoint, not just the general comments in the register. But as a board, you can submit a rule to us on the day that it's proposed in the register. So usually just administratively at our agency, because we have to get things online, we're usually a couple days behind, but our 30-day public comment period can usually run pretty close to y'all's public comment period. It might be behind by a day or two. And then we really will do our best to try to get things done as quickly as possible. And our rules, we only, we have the specific expedited process for kind of those statutory, very specific reasons. But Julie and I, we really do want to be partners to the agencies. And I think we usually communicate a lot with the agencies as we're reviewing rules for them. And so if we know there's that board meeting coming up, it's, the public comment period closes in the register on a Saturday, y'all got a board meeting the following, 10 days after that, we'll really try our best. If you get us the rules to us the day that they're published in the register, I mean, we really will try to work with you to be not much behind those 30 days of when y'all's public comment period closes. Obviously, there's no guarantees, just depending on how many rules we have, but we are cognizant of that. And the governor's office as a whole is, we don't want to slow things down. Absolutely.
And I'll echo that. So we've never actually taken the full 90 days. So even though we have up to that, our average is 62. And I think we've gotten close to that 30-day before. So we will work as far as possible, but it does depend on when we receive those.
Let me ask a question, and I'm sure it's just because that's the way it is, but why would you not get involved earlier in the process with us during the rulemaking process so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel twice? It seems like if you could offer your comments or observations early on while we're still in the developmental phase, it would eliminate a lot of what you do on the back end. Why do you not do that?
And I think the issue is just in order for us to give you the protection from the liability, we have to be looking at the final version that's actually published in the register. And so I think there's a concern that if we, we were working with staff on the front end, we were working through the rules, but then the board ultimately all came to a meeting, we had a discussion, y'all decided to go a different direction, and then it was published. It ended up being something significantly different than what we had signed off on, or even something that maybe looked minor, but in as far as the licensees, it was a huge difference. It was a huge impact on their practice. Then we wouldn't have really been signing off or actively supervising the rule that actually is going to go into effect. So I think that's kind of where the issue is. We were concerned that we would be signing off on something or looking at something before it actually became the final product. And so it's, again, not a perfect process for sure.
I don't like it. I'll just have to tell you, I think this is a much more efficient way. Julie, you're big time on efficiency. This is inefficient. It seems to me like we're going through the process twice when we could do it once. It's easy enough if we deviate from what we agree to on the front end. It's doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that we went a different direction than what your recommendation was. But it is what it is. And I don't want my comments to be interpreted that I don't support what you're doing. And I totally trust what you're saying, that you will try not to slow us down. But sometimes the process itself is cumbersome. And unlike other established agencies, we have a lot to do. And I think the board, we started working on some of these things 6 and 8 months ago, and we didn't even know if we were going to be an agency, but yet we got all of our legwork done in advance of the legislation. So now that when it went into effect September 1st, we're ready to roll on it. And thanks to the board, they did a lot of work that might or might not have been worth it. So anything that slows the process down is really, it's really problematic to me. So, and I know that you will do your best, but please pay a little special attention to the plumbing board, because we are under the gun. We have got some things to do that we have got to get done prior to the next legislative session. Not just because of the legislative session, is because it's long overdue being done.
And I will say, so we have worked with a number of agencies who, even once we've received their review, they wanted to implement additional amendments. We'll work with you. In some cases, we don't have to restart that review. We can work with you to incorporate their amendments. So the process is really, it's meant to work with the existing rulemaking process. We can consider amendments to the rule that's been given to us in going forward and issuing that determination letter most times.
My last question is this. I heard you say you've got oversight, and if they approve the rule, send it back, we're good to go. If you have a recommendation, you give us specifics. What if we disagree with you? How do I appeal? I don't think you're right. I think you're wrong about that. Do I have to talk to the governor or Louise Signs or?
So there is no appeal of our determinations, but if you don't like the instructions that we give you, let's say we disapprove a rule and give precise.
I don't anticipate this happening. I'm just asking the question. So
we understand that that happens, and y'all are the experts. You are the board. We want you to have that policy making function. You can propose to the register different changes as long as they meet the problems that we've identified. You're allowed to go in there. But once we've issued a determination that this aspect of the rule is inconsistent with state policy, that just can't be adopted. But how you fix that, that's completely in your ballpark.
okay. Consistent with state policy, who provides oversight to the legislature who might do something that's anti-competitive? So there is no oversight for legislation, only for the rulemakers. Is that what you're saying?
So because of how antitrust works, the reason oversight is required for boards with active market participants is because there's a concern that when you have market participation, you're not acting as a true arm of the state, even unintentionally. The legislature, when it acts, is truly an arm of the state. So as they've delegated you authority, the need for oversight has increased.
I get it. You're worried about industry circling the wagon and protecting their own and keeping everybody out. And I get that. And I don't want it. So I don't in any way read between the lines my questions, because I wholeheartedly support what you're doing. And quite frankly, I hope that everything we do is going to be consistent with exactly what you want done. And you won't have to send anything back, because I can assure you that our goals are aligned with yours. And we hope, I just wish that you would give us input to start with so we could get it right the first time, because I think we want exactly the same thing. And I don't see a mechanism to do that.
Unfortunately, I think the way the process is, there isn't exactly, and there's also just something else to add. Our statute makes really clear that we can only consider publicly available information. We can only consider information that's in writing. If we get a public information request, we can provide to an interested person. So that also makes it sometimes a little bit challenging and more of a formal process. We couldn't just come over to the plumbing board and sit down with you guys and have a conversation about the rules, because that would be something that we, and I think maybe we would like to on some level, but unfortunately our statute doesn't allow us to do that. Anything that we look at as part of our rule review, it has to be in writing, and it has to be something that, again, I could show someone if someone wanted to see what is all the information that we looked at and making a determination. So that's just a kind of some of your concerns, and that comes from statute. But and I will also mention too, I know y'all, we're not representing this arm of the governor's office, but the governor's policy office will look at y'all's rules before they go to the register, and they're able to kind of sit down with y'all and have some of those discussions as well. And they can they're not obviously looking at it strictly from an antitrust perspective. They can also give insight. I think Chris Smith is y'all's advisor. He can be very helpful as well in some of the pre-conversations that Julie and I can't participate in.
Well, you can have whatever rules. You can have whatever rules you want, but Julie knows I know her and I've got her phone number. And if I've got a question, I'm going to call her in advance. And I don't care what you say. So I don't know you well enough, Aaron, but I'm getting to know you and I'm going to call you too. So we're kind of joking about this, but we really do feel a sense of urgency, and anything that slows down what we're trying to do, because we got a lot to do, we're super sensitive about it. And I'm cautiously optimistic it's going to work. We can't help that it's going to add some time, but I hope that you will work with us to try to keep it to a minimum, because we do have a sense of urgency and a duty to the industry to try to fix some of the issues that we're facing right now that you pointed out. Absolutely, I'll be happy to. So at 2 in the morning, that's right.
I think the governor's office as a whole is very supportive of y'all's work too. I just want to add, I know y'all done so much to respond to the storm, and I know everybody in office, the governor himself all the way down, really appreciates y'all's efforts. And so we do consider ourselves a partner, and our whole agency really appreciates everything.
I feel the same. I feel the same way about the both of you. I really do. That's not going to stop me from telling you where I think. So,
questions, if I could. Two questions off the kind of on opposite ends. I have this vision of, so you get this stuff together, you ask for info, so you spread it all out on a big table, and I envision a bunch of lawyers sitting around and say, what do y'all think? And it's just thumbs up or thumbs down. And I was curious, what is the process for approving or disproving? I mean, is there a matrix? Is there a scorecard? What is it y'all go through? And then two, is there anything prohibiting us from, what if we go through our process and say, we want to propose this rule, we publish it, and we go ahead and we vote the next month and we say yes before you send us a letter. You guys just said that only 10% of what you're looking at roughly you have any input and change, tweak, or deny. So if 90% is passing, couldn't we just pass rules and then y'all amend it later? That would keep us on schedule. And it still allows you to do what you do. And if you say, oh, hey, we found this one out of the 100 y'all have proposed, then we could go and do that. But we're holding up all these things in the chance that we might find 1 out of 100 or 10 out of 100 that might need a tweak or this or that. So could we just go ahead, pass the rule and amend it later? The easy one.
You see what board we got? See how we're all like-minded about efficiency and getting the job done? Don't you just love it?
I love it.
I do too.
So the way we start our review is once we receive the rule, we do much more of an administrative law review. So we're going to look at the rule language. We're going to look at related rules. We're going to look at all the statutes, the legislative history of those statutes, how things have changed, what's changed in the last couple of sessions, and look at really, you have this authority, and typically you do what's called a plain reading of the statute, but there's a lot more context that goes into it. So that way we have a basic understanding, okay, this is the lay of the land. Then taking all the public feedback we can, we'll also go look on public websites, anything that is publicly accessible we can consider. If there are studies available from different groups, we'll look at those. We want to get more of a market consideration as well. Any kind of quantitative information really helps us to do this review, because statute may say one thing, but when it's put into practice, it'll be another. So we look at what is the true market effect. Will this substantially impact licensees? Will this prevent a significant number of licensees from being able to enter into the plumbing industry or progress through the plumbing industry? Can this affect the number of people who can provide services to plumbers? Will this limit the number of services a plumber can provide? So there's some scope issues involved in that. There's definitely licensure issues, some criminal history. We don't get a lot of enforcement stuff, but we'll do a very comprehensive, not just administrative law analysis, but looking at the market analysis side of things as well to consider is the impact to that market consistent with what we have determined legally this statute is allowing this board to do? The reason only 10% of our rules have been disapproved so that we've reviewed is because once our process was put into place, we issued guidance to agencies. There's some guidance from the FTC. I think a lot of the agencies are taking that to heart and taking a little bit more time to consider, is this truly a health and safety issue, or are we just raising the standards to what we think is the best practice? No one is saying best practices shouldn't be followed, but for the state, the role is what is the minimum health and safety requirement to ensure people licensed who should be licensed and aren't licensed who shouldn't be licensed. That's what we're looking at.
Dave's answer is no.
I mean, statute requires if there's a rule that's under our review, it can't move forward if you until you get an answer from us. But again, we're only looking at the rules that affect market competition. So if you have a full package of rules and you don't feel like the need to send them to us, if they don't have a negative impact on competition, if they're verbatim from statute, if you don't think that they need to come to us, then you can move forward with the rest of the rules. It's only those rules. And that's usually how most agencies have sent things to us and how we have initiated rule reviews. For example, like if you have chapters going through the quadrennial rule review process, we'll pull the individual rules that we believe have reasonably may affect competition, but we certainly wouldn't pull just the whole chapter and bring in everything else. And we wouldn't expect you, if you have a rule package of 10 or 20 rules, to hold all of the other rules, just the ones that you believe need to come to us for that anti-competitive review. So that's how we try to get at it, as far as not trying to hold up the whole process or just a couple.
And the process may not be perfect, so input as y'all go through this process helps us too. We want to adapt to make sure, we're meeting agency needs, and if something's a statutory change, we can at least discuss it with you.
Frank, I have a question.
Sure, Ron.
Your flow chart here, and you may have covered this, but I'll make sure I understand. As you go through your process, rule is approved or revised according to division's precise instructions. If that takes place, you do want to amend it, just the 90-day start over. Is there another 90-day wait period?
So it depends on how significant the amendment is, whether or not you would have to send it back to the Texas Register. And for that, you'd have to consult y'all's legal counsel to determine that. But for our purposes, let's say we disapprove a rule and we give them precise instructions, strike subsection B. You can just adopt the rule, striking subsection B consistent with ours, and adopt the rule. So that's completely fine, and that doesn't need to come back to us. The only time it would is, let's say we give general instructions, fix this concept, or you don't like striking subsection B, but you want to reword it. At that point, you may need to republish it in the register anyway, separate from our process, and then you'd have to send it back. We'd look at just that specific portion, and then we could either say, okay, yes, this addresses our concern. No, it doesn't address our concern. That would be a much quicker review, though.
But
Of the rules that you sent back, if only item B that had the issue, we can adopt everything else until we fix item B. Is that correct? Let's say we submit 90% to you, and you come back and say, well, no, 10% of this needs to be revised or deleted. Can we go ahead and adopt the 90% that you didn't have an issue with?
If you have other rules, absolutely. But it depends on if
they're connected, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
No,
But if they're unconnected,
Absolutely.
we go ahead and do it. So the only thing that will be held up will be those that you might or might not have an issue with. I think I get it. And I think we all do.
I'm a little.
You're dealing with private sector people. We don't deal with bureaucracy too well.
The terms, the speed of government, but y'all are new at this. You mentioned the 100 that you've worked on. When these 23 agencies get geared up to this process and start sending you stuff, if you're up to 200 rules that you're reviewing, is it going to be a 90 to 120 day or 9. They say you got to be done in 90. Right now you're saying 60. We're hoping to get better, but I see it getting longer rather than shorter. Okay. But do you see the more work you get, the longer it'll take?
At this point, I think we're not concerned about that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that would be something internally in our office. I mean, if it was becoming an issue where it was more than the two of us could handle or and do it in a timely manner, I think that would be something for our agency to consider. And I think that's, as an agency as a whole, I mean, we want to be a partner, we want to be part of the process. So, I mean, if staffing was an issue or our processes needed to be tweaked because things are really slowing down, that would definitely be something we would look at and try to refine and figure out a way to do it more quickly or get people or whatever we needed to do. If it was really in our block.
The legislature was very deliberate in picking that 90 days because I think it does fit well within that 6-month window that agencies are given. And so at this point, I don't see that changing.
So we might get it down to 60 in the next session, huh? If enough agencies complain. Any other board members have any questions? You guys have been really good sports, and I really appreciate your take. You didn't have to come over here and tell us about this. You could have just done your job and we'd have made it on our own. And we deeply appreciate your coming to meet us and meet our board and giving us a chance to meet you. So I'm cautiously optimistic this is going to work. So, but thank you very much. Done? Okay. You played right into our hands because I said 45 minutes for lunch. It's 12:15. We will adjourn until 1 o'clock when we'll pick it back up. Thanks, everyone.